Right, so this is it. This is a nice slide there to remind us why we're here, the International Coaching Week. And we've got another slide to remind us that it's the Neuroscience for Coaching taster session, just in case you're in the wrong room. I'm assuming that we're all right here. We're in the right place. So the first thing then, I guess I will just introduce myself. And really this is about why you should listen to me, or why bother listening to me. And do I know what I'm talking about, essentially, I suppose. So I started life as a chemistry teacher in terms of my career. That was in my 20s. I did the chemistry teaching in secondary schools. Then I moved to the family business. I got very, very stressed. It's in hospitality. I got really, really stressed. I burnt out. I got chronic fatigue syndrome. I was in a bit of a pickle. So I had to move out of that. And I did that by learning. I learned my way out of burnout, essentially, and how to I incorporated mindfulness and meditation, somatic work. I got rid of beliefs that I was carrying. I went the whole hog, and I learned everything behind it because that's kind of who I am in terms of the science and the learning. And I just wanted to know everything behind all the stuff I was doing. And then I started giving workshops on stress and things like this. But I realized that I didn't have any credentials in that area. So I did a master's in neuroscience and psychology and mental health, which was great. And then I did coaching. I wanted to figure out how to sit with someone and help them not get to where I got to in terms of burnout and all that stuff. So I did my coaching badge with Barefoot. But when I was there, I realized that the belief part of it wasn't cutting it for me. Like writing it down on a piece of paper, like I have to work in order to be loved, whatever, and then chucking it in a bin. It's just like this isn't like sort of doing it for me, right? I just didn't believe it was really working. So I got really into belief clearing then, really into memory reconsolidation, which I'll talk about later. And that allows me to go deep and not visit big capital T trauma, but to go deep and literally change the memories and change the meaning and change your schema, right? Your maps of meaning, how you see the world. So that's what I've been up to. And I've taken 12 years to do that. And hours and hours every day connecting the dots. And this isn't something that I've just learned from a couple of books or regurgitating. You see the same stuff on LinkedIn. It's like, yeah, I've seen that before. I've seen it before. This is all taken right back from like the core roots of everything that underpins all these tools, all the practices, and what's going on in our brain and our body. So I've done all that the hard yards, so you don't have to. That's the point, right? So today we're going to talk about so we're going to kind of go through this course very, very dipping a toe a little bit into each module. So the first module is it relates to our environment. And this can be a bit of a low-hanging fruit when you're coaching. How can I change my environment to put me in a towards state instead of an avoidance state? Really, that's what it's about. Because for a coach, we're going from A to B. Whatever your A to B is, we want to be in a towards state and stop those threat networks that are getting in the way. They're the friction. So that's what that relates to. And then module 2 is behaviors. A lot of that is about mode of being. How do we spend our time? What modes of attention are we using? Because a lot of the time we're overusing certain networks, and that leads us to imbalance and essentially things like burnout and anxiety. Then we'll move to beliefs, and this is what I was just talking about, is how to rewire limiting beliefs. And that's once you change the meaning about certain things and you change your maps of the world, your maps of meaning, your schema, everything else changes. It has a ripple effect on everything, as you can imagine. Once we've gone through those quickly, we don't have much time today, so I'm talking a little bit more quickly than I would normally. Then we'll have a chance for some questions. And then, as James was saying, after the hour, I'll take you, if you have time, I'll take you through a body feedback technique, essentially putting ourselves into a rest of digest state. So I don't want to take too long on this, but part of the point is why study? Why bother? Why bother learning the neuroscience? Why bother learning the biology behind our behavior and things like this? And for me, it's interesting, right? That's the main thing for me. Not the main thing, but the first thing. But also we have this thing that I won't talk too much on, but there's something about experts missing less. So when you're an expert on human behavior and all what's underneath the bonnet, things come up from your client or may come up that you think, hold on, there's something that might be worth exploring there that you might have otherwise missed. I think that happens a lot once you've learned this stuff. The second one is understanding the why and how, specifically with tools and questions. It helps us master certain tools. It helps us motivate to use them. It helps adherence for a client to use certain tools. Sometimes it gives you permission as a coach. You know, I want to get the crayons out. I feel a bit silly. Well, actually, the science says this is a really good thing to be doing. And the same thing for a client. If they might not be normally the sort of thing that wants to bring playfulness, for example, into coaching, you might be able to say, look, you know, this is what's happening in your brain, and if you get your brain to this state, it could help us with X, Y, and Z. So those are the things that it helps us with as well. It can help us remind us of tools that we might already know about that we don't use so much anymore. And it can think, that's why that tool is used by other people, and that's why it's really good to use. Maybe I should use that more. Or maybe there's a tool I use now, but now that I know this about a human, I'm going to tweak it a little bit. Maybe I want to start bringing more somatic into that to make it a bit more powerful, for example, right? Depth can help us get clients move from A to B instead of circles. And this is what I was saying about with this whole belief thing. If you have, for example, if you have a client using burnout, they're using the same networks all the time, must work, must work, must work, must work. They're getting burnt out. Behind that, possibly, normally, there's a belief that says something like, if I don't work all the time, I'm lazy and unlovable and unacceptable. Something like that, right? And if they don't address that, sometimes they can take the time out to rest, for example, but then they'll just go back into the same behaviors and they get burnt out again. They'll do it over and over again. So if they're doing that sort of thing and they're going around in circles, getting to the root of it is what you need to be doing, or possibly. And that helps us, right? So that learning that is really useful. Clarity was confidence. Won't talk too much on that, but that's kind of self-explanatory. And the same with understanding clients and understanding how they might be feeling, the empathy, the trust, the connection, all those things. So really, the course that I deliver is about transformational coaching. It's not so much how do I make 5-figure months and all that sort of stuff. It's about how do I find balance and wholeness? How do I grow? And really, this is just, I won't go through all this, but these are the big thinkers, or some of the big thinkers when it comes to personal development, right? The pioneers. And they spent their whole lives figuring out what's the point in it? What's the point in self-improvement or development, personal development? And really, when you sort of add all this together and you summarize it and you condense it all, we're working towards potentiation or growth, balance, and wholeness. And so this is what I'm all about, these three things. And I think some people get stuck on potentiation, you know, growth. But really, sometimes it's balance and wholeness we need to work on. And once we've sorted that, this potentiation just happens automatically. I think that's worth remembering as well. So how do we move towards growth and potentiation and balance? Well, luckily for us, there's something called neuroplasticity. You've probably heard of it. You may well have heard of it. It's quite common these days, commonly sort of used. And really what we're saying is networks are like muscles. So the more you use a network, the faster and stronger it becomes. If you stop using a network, it starts becoming smaller and slower. And that's important because one, it tells us we can change. We're not stuck who we are. That's a big thing, right? For a coach to believe in that to the deepest level. But also means that it gives us the realization that if we help our clients stop using these ones so much, say they're threat system based networks, or they're just networks they're using too much and they're getting over dominant in the system, we can work on turning those down, and we can work on turning the other ones up. Resting, confidence, gratitude, joy, all those other things that we want to work towards, right? So a coach's job really, then you might call it, his job to provide that space to allow for that plasticity, to allow for that balance and that growth. And this is the model that I came up with, that I use, because I like, when I talk about confidence or clarity is confidence, I like to have a kind of structure to work from in order to allow me that openness, the not knowing, the curiosity. I like to have one foot in order, right? And this allows that for me. As you get to know coaching stuff, maybe not so much, but definitely when I first started as well. So the first module kind of relates to this first layer of change, which is environmental change. This is kind of like the low-hanging fruit, right? And I think Jane will agree with me that, for example, if you have a burnout client, after you've gone through sort of identifying what needs changing and everything else, the things that the low-hanging fruit is the environmental change. The first thing that you normally would change first, it's like, where's the overwhelm in my life? How can I use my time better? Where am I feeling like I'm not being treated fairly? Things like this that you can change and have a ripple effect on everything else. As you start gaining more trust and connection with the client, you generally move up towards, this is how I believe it works, you move towards their modes of being. And this is attentional networks. Am I spending too much time in this mode of being, really, essentially what we're talking about? But also, as a coach, it helps when we're talking about attentional modes, changing from what they would normally be in, work, logical thinking, linear thinking, perhaps into something playful or artful or somatic, a different way that they normally would be, helps us as a coach. So it's not only for them in their lives and learning about attentional networks and modes of being, it's also about how you approach your coaching. And then the third module, and the last thing we'll talk about today, is about beliefs and how to change the beliefs, which I talked about earlier. And a lot of that is about changing the emotional meaning of a memory. And that's really important. It's not just saying, logically, I know there's nothing wrong with me, or I know that I can be confident, but it doesn't feel like that. So that's what you can change. So in module 1, we talk about the dreaded stimuli. These are things that put us in a void state. They activate the threat networks in our brain, and they give us a huge gateway into so many different learnings. I can't even begin to go into them now. All about trust and confidence and countless things. But from a very transactional point of view, you can use them as a bit like human gibbons. Gibbons. I always call it gibbons. It's my own joke. Human givens, where you can use it as a kind of like entry point into something. It's like, if they're struggling to get from A to B on transactional level, where's the ambiguity? Where's the holes in your knowledge? This is going to hold you back. This is the sleeping policeman, right? In that A to B thing. Where am I feeling? Where in your life are you feeling overwhelmed? Where don't you feel like you have enough time? Where are you feeling like you're being treated unfairly? Because all of these things are drip feed into the threat circuitry. They're all feed into chronic stress. Another thing we talk about in the first module a lot. What happens to your brain when you're stressed? Because it changes. And that, in module 1, those away and toward network considerations. We also talk about the dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins, dose chemicals, the neurotransmitters. And these are things that generally are associated with toward things. So they help us go towards being like the opposite to the threat system, which acts as friction, right? So the dopaminergic system, this is what we've got in front of us. You've probably heard of dopamine before, I'm sure you have. And a lot of people call it the reward system, right? I prefer to think it's more accurate, really, to think of it as a seeking system. It's that feeling like, I want to go towards that. I want that. I want more of that, more. We've got two systems here that we can think about. And we've got the the mesolimbic one, the bottom I'll start with. This is the ventral tegmental area here. This is where your dopamine is produced. It's projected, sorry, here. It's projected onto the nucleus accumbens here. And this pathway is the short-term gratification pathway. It's, I want that cake. I want that cake, or I want to play on my game. I want to go on my phone. Short-term dopamine, quick burst. The other pathway, which you could say is a bit more healthy and a bit more useful, is the mesocortical pathway. This is projecting your dopamine from the ventral tegmental area here in your brain stem up to your prefrontal cortex. This is about long-term reward. And this is important because it reminds us the importance of long-term planning. Because this system here, the mesocortical pathway, directly inhibits the mesolimbic pathway, the meso-hungry pathway, right? So the more you've got this active, the less likely you are to give into expedience, to give into wanting that cake, to give into just working a bit more when I know it's better for me to meditate, all those things. It gives the power to the long-term thinking. And so from a coach's point of view then, like really simply, this could be a motivator to say to me or you or whoever as a coach, maybe I should be spending more time on those long-term goals, really fleshing them out, giving power to the mesocortical system, because then they'll be less likely to fall off the wagon and eat the cake, whatever it is. The power, giving the power here, fleshing out that thing, making it feel really visceral, but also making it so that it's almost ever present. Like, you know, you see people have a picture on their desk or something. This is a constant activation of this system to say, right, we're going to keep on track. We're going to sacrifice short-term, small mesolimbic pathway pleasures for long-term reward. The same with the serotonin pathway. This one here, it relates a lot to other things, but also self-worth. So the better I feel about myself, the less likely I am to give into expedience and the mesolimbic pathway, because this one also directly inhibits the mesolimbic pathway. So the more self-worth I have and can cultivate, the better I am at not giving in. So there's two things there you can work on as a coach if your client's fallen off the wagon, right? So the next module then is about attentional networks. And why consider attentional networks? Well, if you have a client, for example, who says, can't switch off, I'm impatient, everything feels like urgent or threatening, I'm exhausted, all these different things, there's a good chance that they've got an imbalance in their attentional networks. And this is what we'll explore now. This is the 10 cells model that's in module 2. I obviously haven't got time to go through all this, but I'll quickly talk about these two at the top here, because these are the two that generally get overused and lead to burnout and imbalance. They're overworking. The directed self is the executive self. It's figuring out puzzles, fix, puzzles. The reactive self is stimulus driven, and it's what next. Looking at my phone whilst watching the TV, whilst eating, this is my resting, right? That's not resting for your brain, let me tell you. So those are the two systems because they're really energy hungry as well. And when I talk about energy, I'm talking about norepinephrine, dopamine, and glucose, because they're the three things that drive like the energetic sort of response in your brain. And those are the things that get burnt out. Also, just worth mentioning here is the creative self as an example, because like I was saying earlier, in coaching, so apart from anything else, the creative self acts as a balance to these two, because these are the energy hungry work, essentially. When you're using these ones, much more gentle, it's way easier for your brain. And you know what that feels like, right? Taking a walk in the wood and writing a poem feels way easier, mentally taxing, less mentally taxing than these two, right? So it's good from that point of view to know that from a neuroscience point of view, this isn't a luxury, creative self. It's almost a I have to if I want to look after myself, if I want to make sure I don't get burnt out. But also understanding the gifts of a creative self and stepping into these attentional networks as a coach in terms of finding novel solutions that aren't readily available by linear thinking, or getting deeper towards how I feel about something through metaphor. We can understand that even better when we understand the neuroscience of those attentional networks. The reactive self that I was saying about just now, what's next, what's next, what's next, multitasking, looking at my phone, constantly checking my phone. You know that thing, like, oh, what? It's that feeling of like, I need to look at something. I don't know why. It's dependent on something called the ventral attentional network, and that is stimulus driven, right? Lots of different things. Where do I need to look? And it's about threat, novelty, and urgency. You know what that feels like. And when that's balanced, and because obviously it's useful, we need this, it keeps us sharp, it keeps us, but only when we need to be, right? It can turn up and down when we need to. It's a dial. But when it comes dominant, if we're thinking about neuroplasticity, when this becomes dominant because we used it so much, that's when we've got a problem because we can't turn off. Then what happens? So these are the stages of overuse, right? You don't need to read all this, I'll explain it. You've got the first two levels, and you could say this is the first level of burnout. When you start you're feeling like you're getting overworked a little bit, it's starting to getting a bit tiring, a bit much. Then you get into this dominance phase, early stage, but where you start feeling hypervigilant, impatient. You can't focus like you used to because you feel like you want to do 10 things at once, and your norepinephrine levels are constantly high, and you don't sleep well and stuff. You can't switch off. That's because this network, the ventral attentional network, or the reactive self, has become dominant. It's overwhelming everything else, and we need to turn that down. If you don't turn that down, you get collapse of the norepinephrine system, the dopamine system, and the glucose, the astrocytes. And that's what we call, but yeah, final stage burnout. You got no motivation, that's your dopamine gone. And you can't keep on task and energized, and that's because your norepinephrine system is burnt out. So this is why it's important to know about attentional systems, right? So then we talk about, well, how do we get out of that? And really it's just, and we know this deep down, it's about using the other networks that we've swept under the carpet. We say they're not important to us anymore because they're not productive, right? And part of this is about giving ourselves permission. It's not a luxury, like I was saying, it's not a luxury to engage in the creative self, or to attend to your emotions, or attend to your bodily feelings, or step into mindfulness. And then we've got this other thing called the directed self, embodied mode, which is using your focused attention, but not on something that's taxing. It could be coloring in, or archery, or something that requires your detailed focus and attention, but it's gentle. And all these things take us away from those energy hungry networks and give us a break. Because a lot of the time we say we're going to rest and we don't. It's not a rest, watching TV, whilst on your phone, whilst playing a game, you say, oh, I'm resting. That's not resting for your brain. So then we move to the third module. And this is mostly talking about the belief systems that behind all that stuff I'm talking about. So behind constantly using certain networks that burn us out, for example. And this is a model I came up with called the split. It's how we get to where we are, essentially. And we start off wholeness. So this is where we want to be, but this is not where we generally are when we're like, say, my 40 odd, right? We start off there, we're 2 years old, we're waddling around the house, we're laughing, we're crying, we're not afraid to be whatever we want to be. We cry when we want something, when we're upset. We laugh when we want to. We express ourselves. But we have to be socialized, right? The problem is kids are very, very sensitive to anything relating to rejection and socialization. Because back in the tribal days, if we didn't get on with our parents, we weren't accepted by our parents, we were done for, because it's tiring looking after children. Energy hungry, giving them our food, all these stuff. So if they think, oh, this one isn't going to fit in, and oh good, let's just leave it, that's the end of you, you're done. So you have to fit in. Yeah, and you have to fit in, and then later on that becomes your peers. You have to fit in with them. So you're incredibly sensitive to anything that feels shameful or rejecting. And this is what you get this here. This is the trauma and the pain. And as coaches, we're talking about small t trauma, right? We're not talking about abuse and things like that. We're talking about the time my dad looked at me funny, or the time my mum decided she didn't want to take me to that thing that she said because she'd rather be with her friends, and that made me feel like I wasn't good enough. These are the sort of things we're talking about when we're talking about coaching, in terms of the level of depth of emotion. And so a pain or a trauma splits us. An example, if I've got a father who only gives me attention when I'm succeeding or working hard, or I've got a father who says to me, even once sometimes, like, get off the sofa, you lazy, go and do your work, you shouldn't be sat down. You split, you think, I can't be like this. If I'm like this, I won't be accepted. And you feel that feels like shame, that feels like rejection, that literally pain networks in your brain go off at this point. I cannot be like that. It's not safe. You split. You over-identify with the hard worker. This is who you become. I'm hardworking. I never rest. I never make mistakes. I always get things right. I cannot rest. This is who I am now. This is what leads us to burnout, right? Obviously. So we can work on turning this down. The other thing that happens, you lock away the parts of yourself. And I think this is a really sad thing that happens. All the beautiful things that sometimes can get locked away here, like expressive parts of me, I get called a show off. Or in this instance, it would be lazy. When you rest, it's lazy. I'm never going to rest. I'm not lazy. That's not me. I'm not a lazy pig. And I don't like lazy people. That's your shadow. And this gets locked away. So if we want to move towards wholeness and growth and all the things we like and balance, we can reintegrate this shadow, the parts you locked away, and we can turn the volume down on this over-identification. I don't have to work all the time in order to feel loved. You can do that through parts work, which we talk about in module 3. This middle one here is about compulsion. It's about not feeling comfortable sitting with who I am and my present experience because it's too painful. So therefore, I'm going to work constantly, or I'm going to take drugs, or I'm going to constantly be on my phone, or whatever your poison is, right? So you can work on coming away from that. When you come away from all these things, you can return to wholeness. The other thing you can do, and this is a big part of module 3, the other thing you can do, very, very powerful, is to change this. This is a memory or a bunch of memories, making a schema or a map. So in this instance, you would say that, the learning here on an emotional level is I'm only acceptable or worthy if I'm constantly working. You can change that through memory reconsolidation, which I'll talk about in a second, to the truth. And the truth is what sets us free, right? The truth is I'm worthy of love regardless of how hard I work. I can still work, but I don't have to sacrifice everything else. And that truth, once that pain is removed, all this comes back. This guy here realizes I don't need to do this anymore. I don't need to be literally killing myself through working. This gets turned down. This comes back into play. Yay, I'm back. And you come back to wholeness. This is how that works. So how do we do that? How do we rewire a brain? There are different ways of doing it. This is the one that you probably use most as a coach, cognitive reappraisal. It's questioning it. Is that true? Do I really need to work all the time in order to feel good about myself? It can work, often not, depending on how emotional that learning is. So the big one for me is learning how to do memory reconsolidation, how to provide that space. So to give you an idea of the difference between the two, cognitive reappraisal, logical reappraisal, and reconsolidation, this is how your memory works. On a very basic level, this is how your memory works, or your schema, right? You've got a dog as the stimulus, and you want to learn not to be afraid of dogs anymore. The semantic, your brain has all the aspects of a memory or a thing mapped out across different networks in your brain areas. So the semantic network is the facts, basically. The fact, a logical fact. So you might start off with a logical fact that says dogs aren't safe. Then you go through this thing questioning, are they? Have you ever been bitten by one? No. Oh, maybe they are safe. So logically, you think, actually, they are safe. That's fine. If you're lucky, that will then permeate all this other stuff, the emotional stuff, essentially. If you're, for much of the time, this doesn't happen. Even if you know dogs are safe, in a logical, factual way, your emotional appraisal says, don't try and kid me. I know dogs are dangerous. And this is a problem. With memory reconsolidation, we open up everything. And this is the difference. We open up the somatic, we open up the emotional. We get as deep as we can to open every single door. And when you open every single door, that's when the brain becomes labile. It says, is this true? You have a window. And then you don't really, it's not about like saying, arguing, it's just opening it. A lot of the time, once it's open, all the truth comes in. And emotionally, it's like, actually, I don't just know dogs are safe, I feel it. I wouldn't mind stroking one right now. I've never felt like that before. And this is a big thing. This is most of module 3 is this. Obviously, I don't have time to explain everything behind it now, but that's what essentially we're doing. So really, that's coming towards the end now. Hopefully, I know that was a bit of a fast, quick fire sort of thing, but I wanted to really give you some, a lot of what I think about and a lot of the way I work, and hopefully that might resonate with you and give you some value. So I wanted to try and pack in as much as I could. So to give you an idea of the course outline, the course that we were talking about, the Neuroscience for Coaches course, that's on the Balanceology website. Essentially, I'll just read these out really, because it's what's in each module. Going from A to B, fundamentals of neuroscience, goals of transformation, threat networks, chronic stress, towards networks and neurotransmitters. That's what you get in module 1. Module 2, how to balance the brain. Modes of attention, attentional network overuse and imbalance, modes of being and coaching, and what drives imbalance. And then 3, what I've just been talking about, memories, beliefs, schema, how they all get imparted on you, how the memory systems work, all of this stuff, all the neuroscience, and how to rewire them, how to find them really, because they are not easy to find. You won't find them just, quickly thinking about them. It's a real kind of art to it. They're very, very specific, these schema. So the bottom line then, as we're coming towards the end, is do you want to know how to help your clients move from A to B? By deactivating those threat systems and engaging towards systems. Do you want to know how brains get out of balance and how to rebalance them? Do you want to know how to literally rewire beliefs so that they can be updated with the liberating truth? And that's the big one. It's all about the truth. And honestly, that line, the truth will set you free, is so true. So that's really the content today. but I thought I would let you know about this offer that we're running, because I'm still recording the last module. It's all done, but I'm still beautifying the slides and recording them. It takes a while. So this won't be out, the full course won't be fully recorded until July the 1st. So we're running essentially it's like a pre-order. So you'll get, it's pretty much half price up until the actual release date. So from now until July the 1st, if you want to book yourself on, you'll get half price. And that's just a reminder there as well that we've got Jane's certified burnout coach. If you're interested in that, I think a lot of you have probably already done it. So that's me. Like I said, I realized that was quite quick fire, but I want to get loads in, and hopefully it wasn't too overwhelming for you. Anyway, any questions? So this is the body feedback exercise. So got to get back into the sort of delivering mode, right? So part of module 2 is about the vagus nerve, the autonomic nervous system, and how to increase vagal tone. I won't go too much into that now because we don't have a great deal of time. But vagal tone essentially is, the stronger that is, the better you are at getting into a rest or digest state. It's like a muscle. So if your vagal tone is strong, cues to say I'm safe land really well. If your vagal tone is bad, that muscle is withered, let's say, metaphorically, even safe signals don't get you into a rest or digest state very easily. So it's very helpful for us to be able to increase vagal tone, to use that muscle so that we're more easily dropping into a rest or digest state. One of those ways, there's tons of ways of doing this, right? There's tons of ways, what they call activating the vagus nerve or stimulating it. But really what we're talking about is activating parts of your brain that then stimulate the vagus nerve. And a lot of them ways of doing that are something called body feedback. So essentially we're sending messages from our body to our brain to tell us we're safe. It's kind of the opposite to what we might think a lot of the time. And you can get like electronic devices and all sorts of things that do this. But the truth is you don't need them. It only takes 10 minutes a day of restricted breathing to maximize that working out of the vagal tone, if you want to say it like that. So when I say restricted breathing, this is what I mean. We take deep breaths. So deep in breath from our diaphragm, right? And the out breath is the important part. The out breath is the part that says to our brain we're safe. It has to be extended and it has to be somewhat restricted. So on our out breath, we have to make it last at least 10 seconds. And we want to have, you can either do it like that, or you can just go, if you can hear that, like you're just restricting your airway a little bit. So that is an ever so slight rise in pressure. So you're breathing in, and then you're counting on the out breath. And by restricting your breathing and slowing that out breath, that sends a safe signal to your brain. And that is working the muscle to increase vagal tone. And it's so simple, right? You can do that anywhere for just 10 minutes a day, and then you've maxed it out. And this is, I'll just quickly explain why that works, because personally I find it interesting. The baroreceptors, so that's the pressure receptors in your carotid sinus, your artery here. It detects a change in blood pressure because your blood pressure ever so slightly increases on that restricted out breath. That sends a message to your brain to say, we're safe. Because probably the reason for that is, if you're bleeding out, you don't get, there's no time where you'll get a nice little increase in blood pressure. So essentially you're saying, we're not bleeding out, don't worry. That's one of the theories behind it. The second thing is, when you slow your breathing down, you increase the levels of CO2 in your blood. When you do that, you have chemoreceptors in your brainstem that say, right, we're not hyperventilating, we haven't got loads of oxygen in the system, we're not breathing really quickly. We must be safe, because if we were running from a bear, we would be breathing quickly and we'd have high levels of oxygen. So it sends a message to the brain, say, when you're doing your checks and balances to figure out, are we safe or are we in danger? This is just a note to say, as far as I'm concerned, we're safe. So those are two sort of reasons why this works. So what happens there? What happens is you get signals from the nucleus tractus solitarius, which is in your brainstem. That goes to another part of your brainstem called the nucleus ambiguus. And then when your nucleus ambiguus is activated, that sends a message to your vagus nerve down to your body, the parasympathetic nervous system, that says, we can rest. It also sends signals up towards your amygdala and your prefrontal cortex, higher brain regions, to say, like I was saying, when you do the checks and balances, by the way, as far as we're concerned, we're safe. It also sends another message to the ventrolateral medulla, which is in your brainstem as well. This part of your brainstem is the part that's, when it's active, it activates the sympathetic nervous system, which is fight or flight. So your ventral medulla, when that's active, that's fight or flight, run, run, run. When you do this exercise, it shuts that off. So it's a multiple armed thing. This is why it's so effective. And the outcomes, like I was saying before, you only need to do this for 10 minutes a day. The very maximum, to get the squeeze every last bit out of it, would be about 8 minutes twice a day. But 10 minutes once a day is almost as good. So you may as well, right? You're more likely to adhere to it. If you do this for 10 minutes a day, it's something like 8 weeks, depending on the individual, every day, your heart rate variability, this is a measure of your vagal tone, increases by about 15%. You get a moderate reduction in state anxiety. That's big, because that's when you say moderate reduction in state anxiety, that feels like a lot. You feel calmer, you recover from stress faster. This is what the research says, by the way. You work better under pressure. You get a reduction of long-term cardiovascular risk of about 5%, which doesn't sound like much, but compared to exercise, which is the best thing you can do, is 25% is actually not bad, right, for sitting for 10 minutes. And this is a massive one. Baseline dopamine is raised by 40%. So I'll talk a little bit on that if we've got time. Baseline dopamine is one of the big things when it comes to keeping interest, keeping motivation, keeping going with things, as we've spoken about before. ADHD, for example, for me, the biggest part of ADHD is low levels of tonic dopamine or baseline dopamine. And when they did a study of this, or something akin to this, into children with ADHD, their parents said that after about 8 weeks, their ADHD behaviors that they didn't want, essentially, were reduced by 30% just from doing this exercise or something like it. So that baseline dopamine raise is significant. So that's my exercise, and I hope you can find use for it.
Thank you, Phil. I'm really grateful for you adding that in at the end of our session. I really appreciate it, and appreciate all of what you've shared throughout the duration of the session. It's, from my perspective, been phenomenal to see you in action with the group here today, and thank you for everyone who's participated live, and hopefully those that are watching the recording have also really enjoyed it, I'm sure, and taken lots from it. And yeah, looking forward to launching the self-study course in July, and just reminding everybody who is watching the recording that they can receive that special offer up until that point, and then it will go to being full price. So thank you very, very much again, and look forward to seeing everyone at some stage in the near future again soon. Okay.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. Thanks for coming, everyone. Yeah, thanks for your time.
Thank you all. Bye for
Take
now.
care. Bye bye.
Bye.